I did drop the link to Ricky Rants in a text as well and said if you want to join, hop in.
Oh, that'd be
Um,
great.
hey guys, we are just gonna wait a moment while we wait for a few people to join. I'm gonna put this on the Twitter. I'm gonna put this on the Twitter. All right. This is a very busy week, which is kind of exciting. 5 shows this week, which is fun. It's a lot, but it's fun. Okay. All right. That is posted to Twitter. I see a few people joined. Let me just share this now on Facebook. So basically, tonight we were supposed to have Edwin and Sharif. Y'all know Sharif. He was my co-organizer for the M for All marches. He is not feeling too hot, unfortunately. So he had to skip out, but we are sending our love and get well wishes to Mr. Sharif, and he will be missed. So I just wanted to give that heads up because I know some of you guys are probably waiting for him as well. He's quite loved in the movement. And he's also one of the main organizers for the Pfizer die-in, which is what we're going to be discussing. So for those of you who don't know, this is Comrade Edwin DeJesus. He is in New York, and that's his beautiful little baby back there snoring. And he actually did the New York M for All. You picked that up, I swear, what was it, like a week and a half before it happened? We were like, oh my God, our organizer quit. And you stepped up and you rocked it. I was like, oh my God, this guy is amazing. I have never seen someone step up and take charge so quickly. It was incredible. And we could not have done that without you. We couldn't. So props. And then you had the Queen Susan Sarandon speak and all that. It was amazing. And then I met Edwin in New York when me, Susan, and a bunch of people, Paula Jean, talked. We gave our speeches outside of AOC's office for the call to action. People call it a protest. It wasn't really a protest. It's kind of semantics. It was a call to action to say, hey, you campaigned on Medicare for All. You don't give a shit. You haven't even tweeted about it in like 9 months. So we're going to hold you accountable. So we met doing that. And now Edwin is one of the co-organizers for the Pfizer die-in, which is in New York on the 15th of November. So that's coming up in a few days. So we definitely wanted to make sure we promoted that on here. So Edwin, what was the deciding factor that, hey, we need to go to Pfizer and we need to do a die-in?
Yeah. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. The New York City March for Medicare for All wouldn't have been possible without the hundreds of people and dozens of volunteers and speakers that showed up to make it so amazing. And we want to keep the momentum going. So that's why we decided to take our fight for Medicare for All directly to the greed of these large pharmaceutical companies. Because even though the politicians are the ones we get to hold accountable at the ballot box, it's these large corporations and their executives who buy and pay for these politicians who we don't get to hold directly accountable unless we do something like direct action. And Pfizer in particular is somewhat of the king of big pharma right now. They're the ones who are buying out all of the media sponsorships. If you look at any news station, you might hear sponsored by Pfizer at the end of the segment. And that's because, he or she who controls the source of information, controls all of the power. And it's this company in particular that has probably generated the most amount of revenue during this pandemic, billions of dollars in profit at the expense of working class people. And what we mean by that is, well, if we can be provided free vaccines and free testing, then where's the support for all other illnesses that are, equally as important? Why is it that we have to be given this almost pseudo version of Medicare for all, where, and I might get to this in a second, but this version of Medicare for all, that, or at least what it would look like, is these free centers where you can go and receive treatment. But the difference is not everyone's insured. 90 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured. It's not actually a publicly owned system of medicine. It's one where the taxpayers are actually footing the bill and the private interests are generating all of the money involved. So how can we take this system, or at least this framework, this beginning of what might be the normalization of free treatment provided to you by your government, and eliminate the private health insurance aspect of it, and eliminate these executives in the big pharmaceutical companies who are price gouging life-saving medicine and upcharging the cost of prescription drugs, and the failure of the two-party system to actually combat that greed. And as we can see with the legislation that the Democrats are putting forward right now, where they've completely neglected the cost of prescription drugs, except for, I think it was 10 that wouldn't actually be changed for another few years. I think it was like 6 to 8 or even 10 years. So we're moving at an extremely slow pace. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that healthcare has been normalized as a commodity and a privilege. And we want Pfizer, who have come out almost as like pop culture icons as a result of this pandemic, to declare their support of a single payer Medicare for all system. And if they don't, then they should be public about the fact that they don't, and let people know that they don't view healthcare as a human right. And if they won't even do that, we will continue to expand and evolve our direct action, specifically targeting them.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things is like, you know, I'm seeing pushback from people about you guys protesting Pfizer because of all the good they've done during this pandemic. They've given millions of free vaccinations. How could you protest them? And like you said, they have made billions of dollars. They are not donating anything. It's not like you go get a vaccine and it's like, oh, thank you, Pfizer, for donating this. Thank you so much. No, they're getting paid by the government. They're still making the money. They're just giving it because they're still making the money. And, one of the very, very few things that Trump actually did was giving a discount on insulin, which Biden actually removed. So now insulin is even more expensive than it was under Trump. So, any kind of breadcrumbs that people are given are either taken away or exploited as this amazing thing that everyone should just praise them for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what they should be doing. This is their job. And like you said, it's not a philanthropic endeavor. It's purely profit motivated. We know that consultants have told these health insurance companies and big pharmaceutical companies that cures are not viable, that a cure is not what's going to generate billions in profit. where it's better to have a sick care system where you continuously treat people so that you can keep making money while they're sick. That's a well-known fact. It's always been a pro working class position to be critical of the big pharmaceutical companies. But we do live in a time where, like I've said before, so much of our media is sponsored by Pfizer that they're always painted in a good light, and that we'll never really get headlines about Chantix, which was an FDA approved drug, and they had to recall it because after 15 years, it's known to cause cancer. So this is not necessarily about pro-vax or anti-vax. This is just about the greed of large pharmaceutical companies, and there are many, manifestations of that greed that we can talk about. But I think in general, it's most important to note the fact that they have the resources available to give us a system that would be like a single payer Medicare for all system, and they are holding it back. And the fact that their board of directors, which includes Scott Gottlieb, was the former head of the FDA, and that we need to call attention and expose the fact that there's a huge revolving door between our federal government officials who end up becoming leaders within these private organizations. And so that is a direct conflict of interest. And as a result, thousands of people are dying. And the people who are still alive might have a lower life expectancy as a result of the negative externalities when you have a sick population who is lacking health insurance.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. There really is no accountability for these people who are so rich and profiting off of our pain, suffering, and even deaths. So where can we draw the line? Some people think that electoral politics is the way. Some people think direct action is the way, and some people think it's a mixture of both. So I know you just ran for office. And what is your take? Do you think it's one or the other or a mixture?
I definitely think it's a mixture. I will say the most fun part about the last year obviously included many aspects of a political campaign that we ran, but the March for Medicare for All was the highlight of my life. And I think that even though it had minimal coverage in the press, it was still something that was so invigorating to have all these people come together for a common cause, regardless of political ideology or party, where you had Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, everyone under the same umbrella. That's what truly scares the establishment. When you run as a candidate, you are kind of playing the game. And I was trying my best to play outside that game by running as a third-party candidate under the Green Party, by challenging the powers that be, holding progressive leaders like my representative AOC accountable, and holding the big pharmaceutical companies, or at least attempting to want to hold them liable for any injury that they can cause to people who lack the insurance to cover any expenses that might, incur with whatever suffering they've received from their drugs. So, in terms of electoral politics, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I don't think that we can shoehorn a corporate movement into a working class party like the Democrats or Republicans. But running as a third-party candidate in New York City specifically, there are tons and tons of institutional barriers. The biggest one being that we only have ranked choice voting in these closed primaries that benefit mostly Democrats here in New York. And in general elections, it's winner takes all. And in New York City, we used to have proportional representation where you would have representation in City Hall based on the amount of votes you received, not if you won or not. And that's how we were able to get big progressive leaders who are running outside of that. Well, it wasn't really much of a duopoly back then, but now it is, because they took all of those freedoms away, the freedom of choice of who to vote for. Now it's even harder to just get on the ballot. For example, Governor Cuomo eliminated multiple third-party ballot lines last year. And when he made a rule this year for petitioning, he made it easier for the Democratic Party to get on the ballot with less signatures required, but still the same amount of signatures required for minor party candidates as they were pre-pandemic. So, putting aside all of the neoliberal media bias and people who are afraid of the spoiler effect. Just the act of not having the same democratic process that you have for third party candidates as you do the Democrats and Republicans alone makes it so substantially challenging that you almost have to change the rules of the game before you participate in yourself. Now, I'm very glad with the results we had. They're not 100% counted, but it looks like we ended up with something close to 6%. And as a first time candidate running outside the duopoly, who's only 24 years old, I think that's a pretty good accomplishment. I'm
Heck yeah, it
definitely
is.
open to doing it again. I think time is on our side. We know from polling data in Virginia, for example, that the younger generations, Gen Z, are more akin to third party politics. And so that as there are more young people who become eligible to vote, the more likely we can actually have stronger showings for third party candidates. So to answer your original question, yes, I think it's very much important that we give voters a third or fourth or fifth choice every election year so that we can normalize having non-corporate candidates run who don't take the money, who don't listen to the leaders like Eric Adams or Nancy Pelosi, and actually holds them accountable instead of making peace agreements with them. I think we have that, but we also have to have the direct actions, the grassroots organizing, the protests, the die-ins, the education and tabling for state level initiatives, and of course these marches for Medicare for all.
Absolutely. And, as far as there are some people who are concerned with die-ins because of PTSD effects, things like that. And a lot of us disabled folks, some people may not even be able to do it. So, what do you suggest as an alternative?
Yeah, so what we will have are people who can either lay on the floor or sit on the floor. But if you can't do that, you can definitely be in whatever position is most comfortable for you and just be in solidarity with us in that same physical space. And if you can't make it to the event, to at least share it on social media so that we can show, people's lives have been lost because of the profit over people agenda that the ruling class of oligarchs have, and that different forms of protests obviously can be beneficial, right, strategically. And we think the fact that so many people have died was a good calling for a die-in, but you are right, it is not fully accessible. So as long as you can at least share and spread the word and encourage others who might be able to participate, but also just being there in that space so that we can all come together physically as friends and family and fellow activists, so that we can at least have those conversations. That's going to probably be for me the most fun aspect of it, is really getting to know the people who are driven to come out and support these kinds of causes and hear about what initiatives that they're fighting for, so that we can continue building and expanding on this broad coalition of working class activists, fighters, candidates, workers.
Absolutely. And as I always say, anytime there's an event, if you can't go or you're not able to go, you can do other things such as bring a case of water, bring some signs that you made, or even just bring Sharpies and poster board, things like that, are really, really appreciated when you're organizing something. Um, but I digress. When we look at social media and we look at people like Pramila Jayapal, who Alyssa Shalano yesterday said, I just donated to Pramila. Please join me. Okay, that's a problem. So and this is someone who, the other person who wrote the damn bill, who is, yay, we're lowering Medicare to age 60 when, Hillary Clinton even said 55. So we are noticing these people who say they support Medicare for all going more and more and more to the right. Being an AOC actual constituent, what do you think the effect would be if she, who has over 12 million followers and a lot of fans, would say, you know what, Pfizer dying November 15th? What do you think that effect would be?
Well, you could look at AOC's earliest initiatives where she did stuff like that and organized a protest in Pelosi's office. And it
Yeah.
was way more effective than messaging, like at the Met Gala address, for example, because, I mean, you look at this bill, there's going to be tax cuts for the ultra wealthy. So
Yep.
clearly that strategy didn't work. But the original forms of calling out all of these people to come, ordinary people to come out to these kinds of events, did actually pressure those in power and did scare, I think, Pelosi enough to want to form some sort of alliance with AOC, where I think AOC has ultimately moved to the right. And that's, unfortunate to say. I'm obviously disappointed about that. But it's very clear that even with the marches, which had a lot more momentum and enthusiasm than probably any event, any kind of national grassroots organizing that I've ever seen, to avoid it, that was a telling sign. And I think even before that, with the whole force the vote stuff, with her kind of condescension about and excuses about why it couldn't be done. And I think it's quite ironic how, one of the things she was saying that she would save her leverage for was to get onto some committee. I think it was something energy related, or I forgot exactly which committee it was, but it was Kathleen Rice ended up beating her to get
Yeah.
that seat. And it's Kathleen Rice, who's a big pharma shill, who has made it so that Bernie was proposing to lower the cost of prescription drugs through direct negotiation with Medicare, and Kathleen Rice killed it. So it just goes to show that, we're not going to get the material change we need for the working class through incrementalism, through saving leverage for committee seats. We're going to get it through these kinds of actions and grassroots organizing. And even Medicare expansion, which is something we were promised, hearing aids, dental, vision, those were gutted from the bill as well. And Bernie, who was, promising to go to West Virginia to hold Manchin accountable, still hasn't done that. So, and the social spending bill has been delayed. So was Jayapal played, or did she know this was going to happen? I think they all knew this was going to happen. I think they failed to really, not just hold the line, but to make sure that it was never. They just made concessions almost from the get-go by starting low. You have to start high, and when you have people in the streets who are telling you that they want you to start high, then you can probably feel more confident going into the negotiating room and saying, look at all the people in the street. Those are people who are not going to, we'll tell them not to vote for you, for the Democrats, not to donate unless you, fulfill our list of demands. So yeah, 100% as a constituent of AOC, I feel disappointed. Time is running out. We have the climate crisis, which is existential. The mental health crisis that we're at right now, where children are having record levels of depression and suicidal thoughts. I mean, this is something that's going to take decades to reverse, and we're not treating it as such. And so I think, I think, yeah, I think that these actions really show that we have more power than them. There are a lot more of us than there are of them. And if we really want to make this into something big one day, like a general strike, where we can really screw up the supply chains and hold those means of production, then we can actually have the ruling class obey us for once.
Absolutely. The power is in numbers. It really is. That's why these actions are so important. And I know not everyone can do that. And I know not everyone can attend. I'm in Pennsylvania. I don't have the monetary means to get to New York to do this. But I'm still going to share the posts. I'm still going to, share the live streams, things like that. We all have something we can do, all of us. So, and, there's no reason why, so many times I've organized, protests and such. in Harrisburg, PA, because I see it going on in New York or what have you. You can always do that as well. Even if 5 people show up, who cares? That is so important. That's 5 people who are taking a stand. It's not about how many or anything like that. It's just the fact that people come out in solidarity for an actual issue that needs to change. And it really is, like you said, it's so invigorating. I mean, you know, we organized 56 Medicare for All events across the country. Like, that is absolutely one of the best things I've ever done in my life. I don't know, besides like my wedding day, I don't really know like what else. Like, I'm so proud of that. And I'm so proud of us. And yeah, I mean, it was life changing. There's no question. And if we can have other people do things like that, I mean, that was literally the power of social media. You have one in DC, and then there's more and more and more and more, and it snowballs. Unfortunately, we saw general strike October 15th. Not a great showing, a great you know I couldn't even find any info on it. I didn't know anyone who went. It wasn't very well organized, to be quite honest with you. So unfortunately, I think before an actual real general strike, I think a lot more organizing is going to have to take place. That was a first try, we'll say. While I am on the topic, our brothers and sisters at Fred Hampton Leftists do have their General Strike Summit this weekend. I am also I do Wednesday panels with them, so I'll be on there tomorrow night. But Sunday I will be doing a show on FHL for the labor movement. I have guest Liz Medina. She is a labor movement and union expert all the way back to the 1800s. And I also have Chuck Modi, who is a journalist who has been in the streets every day for 12 years, interviewing activists and people who know what it's like to go on strike. So I'm really looking forward to that. Edwin, what are your thoughts about a general strike?
I think it's something that we need to aspire for. I think it's almost like the end goal. If we can get some targeted strikes over a time, a period of time where more and more unions get on board, that's really the only way we're going to be successful. Kind of like in the 1930s and 40s when labor union movements were so strong that they actually pushed FDR to become this progressive icon that he became because of all of the pressure. And so if we continue to reach out to organize unions like Amazon Labor Union, for example, being spearheaded by Chris Smalls, who was a part of our New York City Medicare for All
Yes.
March, and have other labor unions that aren't necessarily in the palms and pockets of these Democratic and Republican Party power players, we can build that coalition across party lines, Green Party, People's Party, even DSA and other organizations that want to get involved. If we can build something massive, even if there are people we disagree with, like you said, the numbers are really what counts. And we have more similarities in common than we think. And that's how we're going to be able to actually have that general strike one day. And it will require a lot of, what's the word? It'll require a lot of grit, a lot of planning, a lot of dedication, and a lot of money. The most important thing probably is the money, because there are so many people working paycheck to paycheck that if they miss just one day of work, that can be life or death for them. That can mean having food on the table. That can mean, being on the verge of bankruptcy from owing so much in medical debt or student loans. So there has to be a massive fundraising effort. And how can you ensure that something like that doesn't be corrupted? Well, you need to have really powerful people coming together and ensuring that legally everything is sound, and that it's like a horizontal structure where everyone kind of has some sort of ownership, and that it remains decentralized. That's one of the things I love about this M4 All group is people always say, well, who's backing this? Who's in charge? Well, there really is no institution backing this. This is as authentically grassroots, as revolutionary as it gets, because it's just ordinary people all kind of having an equal level of input. And obviously that comes with some cons in the terms of the efficiency of organizing, and there might be a lot more infighting. But ultimately, that's the only way that you can assure these kinds of movements don't become co-opted. And so a general strike kind of functions the same way, where you have to have all these different partners involved from all different walks of life and ideology, people we, will just have to agree to disagree with on other means, but at least coming together against the ruling class is something that we can all strive for. So I do want to see a general strike, and heck, I'd be willing to help put on events, with more speakers, with more musicians to inspire stuff like this. That's definitely my bread and butter, is doing these kinds of events. I was an event person for the Bernie campaign. I got to go around the country, putting on rallies for Senator Sanders, back then presidential candidate Sanders, and people were coming out in the thousands because of Medicare for all, among other progressive policies. They were not coming out there for a public option, for lowering the eligibility age to 60, or even just expansion. They were coming out for Medicare for all, and people will come out if they understand what a general strike would mean to them. And that is kind of the second most important thing, is the education, because not too many people understand the history of the labor union movement in this country. Heck, I'm no expert, but the more that we can have conversations like the ones that will be held at this summit, and the more that we can let people know what they would expect in some sort of situation like that, I think the closer we can come to actually normalizing it happening in the real world one day in the near future.
Absolutely. Are you guys at the die-in? Are you going to have any kind of mutual aid?
There will be some organizations there that will be doing some tabling, and I believe there will be some mutual aid. What we're hoping for, and we hope nobody gets arrested, but this is a potentially arrestable action. Our original goal was to set up a bail fund just in case that would be necessary. I don't know if we have the means to do that independently at the moment. But if you go to the m4all.org website, there is a donate button there. I know the treasurer. They're wonderful people. They're not corrupt, believe me.
I can vouch. I can
yes,
vouch.
that money strictly went to reimbursing out-of-pocket costs from ordinary people who were chipping in to put on those events, whether it be for some sound equipment or something like that.
I am
It is,
still,
yeah.
I dropped over $3,000, and I still am very much in arrears from that, because what are you going to do? There's a bunch of us, you know what I mean? But I mean, it's worth it. It's just, I think people need to understand how much money it costs. Like, we had to rent porta pots and sound systems, and like, oh my God. Yeah. So it's so expensive. So anything people can donate absolutely helps. But I also brought up mutual aid because last night on my show, Postmortem Breakdown on Compton Jay's other network, I do a Monday show, which is Populist Voice Network. We had a young lady, Hannah, on, and she started a mutual aid network on Discord where it connects people all across the United States, on people in need or people who want to help. And it's just absolutely incredible. So anyone's watching, please check out last night's show. She is really changing lives with this. It's incredible. And also on that note, as far as mutual aid, people need to start sharing it more on social media. As I swear, I'm like the only person I see sharing it with a so-called big account, especially. So every single day, just type in hashtag mutual aid. Someone will come up, hit share. It takes 2 seconds, but a lot of people are hurting, and it goes a lot further to help people like that than campaigns or things like that. Go to people who are saying they can't eat, or they're going to lose their apartment, or their lights are turned off, things like that. So definitely, at the very least, if you cannot afford to donate, please just share. We only have each other. That's the truth. It may sound trite, but it is the truth. um Edwin, what would you like people to take away from this show, for the Pfizer die-in, for Medicare for all, for any and all?
Yeah, I would hope that people can understand that all of these issues are inextricably tied to each other. They're all connected. Housing, healthcare, education, climate. These are all things that are, two sides of the same coin. Likewise, the duopoly, Democrat and Republican parties, also two sides of the same coin. And when it comes to private sector interests, like such that of the big pharmaceutical companies and our federal government, also two sides of the same coin. So nothing here really exists in a vacuum. When we protest one thing outside of Pfizer, it's not just because Pfizer is the only source of our suffering. It's much bigger and grander than that. And something that might seem unrelated, for example, the homelessness crisis that we have in New York City. Well, we have enough money to solve that today, and our local officials are choosing not to, and instead give tax abatements to the fossil fuel industry, Wall Street, big real estate developers, and of course, big pharmaceutical companies, private health insurance companies. So when we talk about funding our communities and funding the people, we should be talking about where can we actually reallocate those resources. And I think that the billions of dollars in profit that these large corporations have made at the exploitation of workers during this crisis, during this pandemic, is an excellent source of revenue to be distributed through mutual aid organizations on the ground that create a safer community, that give people a sense of, one with their neighbors, so that it isn't such a hostile environment right now. Because unfortunately, we do live in a world today where polarization is through the roof, and a lot of it has to do with the media purposely pushing through narratives sponsored by Pfizer that divide us, that cause us to view each other as us versus them, and the otherization of other people, and all of these wars that are going on between different groups of people. A lot of that has to do with the media continuously pushing these divisive narratives, because when the more that we are angry at each other because of their misinformation and their misknowledge, the less likely that we're actually going to hold these criminals at the top accountable, because what's the saying? United we stand, divided we fall. So it's essentially that. And really, again, the biggest source of suffering for not just New Yorkers, not just America, but the globe as a whole is greed. And so greed is manifested in many ways. Corporate greed is, I would say, on the top of the list of a reason that people are dying, more so than just this virus alone. It is the failure of the politicians who are enacting policies that hurt us, and that if they truly had the empathy that people were attributing to, Joe Biden, for example, then he wouldn't come out and say he'd veto Medicare for all if it came to his desk. And Kamala Harris wouldn't mock it in an interview on 60 Minutes. If the government actually cared about our health, they would pass Medicare for all.
Absolutely. And I see Puppy back there was nodding. Yep. Totally
Yes.
feeling it. Oh, the cutie. Well, thank you so much, Edwin, for joining. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I am so proud of you and all you are doing Again, shout out to Sharif. I hope you feel better. I hope to do another show when you're more up to it. Thank you all for joining and watching. Let me see if I can see who's in the comments. I'm not sure if I say your name right, if it's Louis or Luis, but I recognize you from Twitter, I believe. So thank you so much. And let's see. Looks like Andrew Dwyer. I hope I'm saying that right. Thank you so much for tuning in. So thank you guys so much for watching, and you can check me out tomorrow night on the Wednesday panels we do on Fred Hampton Leftist. Thursday night back here at 9 p.m. Eastern with this week's news with special guest Amira, who also does FHL panels with me, and then Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern for the General Strike Summit. So thank you all so much for watching, and thank you once more, Edwin. Great work.
Thank you so much for having me on, Joy. Thank you so much for amplifying our event. Please follow the M4M4All Twitter account for updates. I just dropped the link for the Eventbrite for the die-in in the chat. And please, if you can, come, bring some noisemakers. It's going to be an excellent time. So hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care.